an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Crooked Kingdom by Lee Bardugo, brought to you by Jill. In this episode, we are going to be joining the dregs as they try and rescue Inej, but also there's another player in town, and I have no idea what to think about the people who came to scoop him up. I'm a little concerned. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everybody. I am Natasha, and I am excited that I got to jump into this next book so soon. The sponsorship for the Six of Crows episodes were a little bit inconsistent, so I was sort of expecting that once I finished the first book, I wasn't going to be able to start the next one for a while. I kind of thought it would rest, but Jill actually commissioned this episode as an episode of Six of Crows, not realizing that somebody had already commissioned what would be the last chapters of that book. So she said, no, go ahead and start Crooked Kingdom. And I'm stoked about it. Because it does feel like a story that picks so completely up from where the last one left off in so many ways that I probably, if I waited too long, would have had to reread the ending of Six of Crows before starting this one, because they're just so linked that if I lost track of anything, I would be a little bit confused here. And don't get me wrong, I'm still a little bit confused, because the first three chapters are Retvenko, Wylan, and Matthias. And obviously we know Wylan and Matthias, but Retvenko is brand new. Retvenko is not a native. He does not speak Kirsch very well. He is Ravkin, and he is suspicious of people who talk to him. The bartender asks him if he's Ravkin, and he sort of gets on edge about it. Retvenko told himself to relax. Plenty of Ravkins came through Ketterdam looking for work. There was nothing on him that said Grisha. His cowardice filled him with disgust at himself, the barman, this city. He wanted to sit and enjoy his drink. There was no one in the bar to jump him, and despite the barman's muscles, Retvenko knew he could handle him easily. But when you were Grisha, even staying still could mean courting trouble. There had been more rumors of disappearances in Ketterdam recently. Grisha vanishing from the streets or their homes, probably snapped up by slavers and sold to the highest bidder. Retvenko would not let that happen to him, not when he was so close to buying his way back to Ravka. So let's back up here. There had been more rumors of disappearances in Ketterdam recently. Interesting. He literally gets scooped up by a dude with wings later. What the fuck is going on? Is somebody building a Grisha army? Because those wings look more than... that's some fucking other shit. I am dying to know what he's getting involved in, because I feel like it has to be linked to the... what are they called? The storm people that were in the ice court when our crew was there and started to cause their own trouble. And then poor Jesper has to use his seldom used Grisha power to bore a bunch of holes through their skin using the iron filings on his clothing. And these, the fact that he himself is somebody who has power over storms and is one of the ones that gets taken, I feel like can't be accidental. There has to be something linking that. But they are also, we had a bunch of people who were working with Van Eck, who were obviously able to manipulate I mean, I can't tell if they were on Jura Parem or not. I don't know that they were. But I'm wondering if this all has to do with Van Eck. I'm really hoping it doesn't, because Van Eck is scum, and I want the Grisha to be like working secretly to make an army to keep themselves safe. Like, basically, I want the Grisha to have some agency here. And if it turns out that this is just some other, like, employer who is taking advantage of desperate people in order to give them an outlet for their violence, I'm going to be really sad about that. So, yeah, this hint that, like, something's been going on and people have been disappearing, our crew wouldn't necessarily know about that, because they haven't been back very long. They've been very distracted with one particular purpose in mind that they're trying to achieve. And I think it's Matthias later who's thinking about the fact that not having Inej with them at this point makes it so that intelligence is a lot harder to come by in terms of what's going on in the town, because she was the one who would, skulk around and find things out and listen in on conversations. So now everything has to be found out by a combination of, like, skulking that is much lower quality skulking than Inej's, and direct, like, conversations or leading people down the path where they begin to talk about something the way that Nina does. And Nina's not doing super well. Kaz is a little too well known and too scary. And fucking Jesper, like, Jesper just is too desperate, I think, to, like, prove himself, and can't be trusted in a position where he gets to talk almost at all. It's the scene later with him I had some feelings about. So Retvenko, he downed his whiskey, slammed a coin on the counter, and rose from the bar stool. He left no tip. A man could work for a living. I'm like, dude, what do you think what are you talking about? That's what tipping is working for. Like, what do you, you know what? I'm not going to let this turn into a whole thing about me yelling about tipping, because, that's not what this is about. But tip people. That's all I'm saying. So he fucking hates Ketterdam. Like, he can't handle it. It's so smelly and wet and cold and depressing. He's trying to drink to get warm. That shit doesn't work. He's trying to, like, use the whiskey to cover up the smell of everything, like, decaying in this fucking town. That's really not working either. And here's the first introduction. He passed along Graf Canal, shivering as he glimpsed Black Veil Island tucked into the water's bend. That was where the Kirch wealthy had once buried their dead, in little stone houses above water level. Some trick of the climate kept the island shrouded in shifting mists, and there were rumors that the place was haunted. Retvenko hastened his steps. He wasn't a superstitious man. When you had power like this, there was no reason to fear what might lurk in the shadows. But who liked to walk by a graveyard? So yeah, that's the first introduction to this island, which we find out later is where the crew is making their headquarters, essentially. And then we have his thoughts to himself, because, like, we know he is trying to pay off an indenture. And shockingly, he's very close to doing it. He only has to do 2 more trips before he's done, which I've always been under this, like, impression that indentured servitude was basically as good as slavery. Like, you really weren't going to find a way out. But that wasn't necessarily the way it always went. And I won't say it as good as slavery, because indentured servants weren't treated like slaves. Like, there was a whole different deal with the way that they were valued and treated as human beings. But what I mean by that is simply that they would, like, lie and tell you that you had a way out, and then constantly shift those goalposts. And I'm sure that is how it worked plenty of the time. But it's not always. People were able to buy their way out. And in this situation, apparently, he's really close to doing that, which makes the fact that he gets, like, swiped at the last second, kind of heartbreaking. Soon he'd be back in Ravka where he could stroll the streets without fear, assuming he got his pardon. The war had pitted Grisha against Grisha, and his side had been particularly brutal. He'd murdered former comrades, civilians, even children. But what was done could not be undone. King Nikolai needed soldiers, and Retvenko was a very good soldier. So, damn, he'd murdered former comrades, civilians, even children. Is it that he's being scooped up because of his crimes? Are they going to punish him? Do they know who he is? Have they tracked him? It's possible, but I don't think they'd like take him alive. I feel like they would just kill him and be done. So I feel like they want him on their side for whatever reason. I don't know. Yeah, I guess we'll see. But I am very curious about, like, because there are apparently like a million factions now, you know, so it could be any number of different things. Retvenko nodded once to the guard stashed in the little booth at the entrance to the Fourth Harbor and glanced over his shoulder, confirming that he hadn't been followed. So he gets here and he's trying to, like, just, you know, get on with it. And the first mate can smell the whiskey on him, and is just like, dude, oh my God, are you drunk right now? And he's like, no, I had like a little bit of whiskey. Go dry out, get some coffee or strong jorda. This cotton has to be in Zurjholm in 2 weeks' time, and we aren't paying you to nurse a hangover below decks, understood? Yes, Retvenko said with a dismissive wave, already heading toward the harbor master's office. But when he was a few steps away, he flicked his wrist. A tiny whirlwind caught the papers the first mate was holding, sending them flying over the docks. Damn it, he shouted as he went scrambling over the wooden planks, trying to capture the pages of his manifest before they blew into the sea. Retvenko smiled with grim pleasure, then felt a wave of sadness overtake him. He was a giant among men, a gifted squaller, that's the word I was looking for, a great soldier, but here he was, just an employee. A sad old Ravkin who spoke broken Kerch and drank too much. There's all kinds of little character things happening here that are very revealing and I really enjoy. Because, you know, obviously there are people like Jesper who keep their gifts under wraps because they simply don't want anyone to know who they are. There's people like Nina who are so beautiful and charming and what's the word I want? Sort of alluring, that she's able to make use of her skills in a way that, like, actually works with a lot of her other skills as a human being, like, outside of what she can do that's sort of supernatural. And this guy is a whole other beast where he's able to do something that's really intensely impressive, but he is impressed with himself. Like, he isn't somebody who is tortured by his gift. You know, he's not somebody who's like, well, I wish I wasn't what I am so that I could just be a normal person and not be persecuted. There's nothing like that. It's known what he is, but then he does really petty bullshit, like mess this guy's papers up just for fun, just because he's irritated, you know? And, I feel like that says a lot about who he is. That also, I'm wondering if, like, the first mate realizes that it was him that did this, because I'm not sure the way that is written. You know, it doesn't seem like he had the time to stop and give Retvenko a dirty look for messing up his papers. So it could go either way. He might be perfectly aware and just be like, this fucking guy, or he might not put it together that Retvenko could do something that subtle and immediate. But yeah, the fact that this guy is like, he has basically committed war crimes and he's waiting to be invited back. And the whole thing is just really like, yikes, guy. You know, he is a mess and he does not appear to have real regret for what he's done. He's drinking because he's unhappy where he is, because he doesn't feel like he's living according to the stature that he deserves. He does not feel that this place is representing him in the way he is due because of what he is. There's a real entitlement to him. And I find that pretty compelling, given that we haven't met that many Grisha. And those that we have, like, you know, Nina is one, and then we have Jesper, who's like kind of not, he has not honed his skill. He hasn't been trained. He's been trying to hide it. So we haven't gotten a wide variety of personalities connected with having these kinds of powers. And it's really tempting because we like Nina and because she has given us so many like examples of horrors that she's seen at the hands of the Fjerdans. It's easy to be like, oh, these persecuted people are, they're not doing anything wrong. They're not trying to hurt anybody. They just want to live, and they're being like tracked like animals and taken down. And not to say that that isn't true, but we haven't seen anybody who you kind of feel like, oh yeah, track this motherfucker down. You know, like, I appreciate us being presented with somebody who is of a totally different bent in how he perceives the world and how he decides he's going to handle his power, because it just, you need to underline the fact that Grisha might be different than the average human being in a lot of ways, but they aren't different from the average human being in that they're all going to be wildly different people with different priorities, different ideologies that they ascribe to, different moral like codes or not. You know, this guy apparently is one of the or nots. And I think it's really important to remind everybody that Grisha aren't just like, you know, these perfect angels who just happen to have powers and are persecuted simply for their powers. It is, they are people who are able to do something unusual and very dangerous. And some of them may be people you don't want having these powers. This is like, you know, X-Men stuff. They're all going to have their own thing that they think is right and wrong. And they're all going to draw their lines in totally different places. So yeah, I find this really interesting. So he goes to get some coffee. And Retvenko can hear, as he's in there, somebody yelling. And this clerk won't shut up. He keeps telling the guy to shush because he can hear something, and the clerk won't listen. Retvenko raised a hand, and a gust of air slammed the clerk back into the wall. I said be silent. The clerk's mouth dropped open as he hung pinned to the slats. You're the Grisha they got for the crew? For saint's sake, was Retvenko going to have to pull the air from this boy's lungs and suffocate him into quiet? So, like, you know, this is some shit, man. He is willing at the drop of a hat to use his power to, like, overpower people, hurt them, or at least cow them. This is a particular kind of person. So, they're in the middle of, like, talking about what he's going to be paid. When the door to the office explodes and a woman enters. They've come for the payroll, the clerk shouted. Ain't no one taking the payroll. Retvenko watched in shock as the gangly clerk stood like some kind of avenging warrior and opened fire. By all that was holy, nothing could motivate Kirch like cash. Retvenko peered around the desk in time to see the shotgun blast strike the woman directly in the chest. She was thrown backward and collided with the door jamb, crumpling to the floor. He smelled the sharp burn of gunpowder, the metallic tang of blood. Retvenko's belly gave a shaming lurch. It had been a long time since he'd seen someone shot down in front of him, and that had been in a time of war. Ain't no one taking the payroll, the clerk repeated with satisfaction. But before Retvenko could reply, the shoe woman wrapped her bloody hand around the doorframe, hauling herself to her feet. Retvenko blinked. Just how much whiskey had he had? The woman marched forward. Through the remains of her tattered blouse, Retvenko saw blood, flesh pocketed with buckshot, and the glint of what looked like metal. The clerk fumbled to reload, but the woman was too fast. She grabbed the gun from his hands and swatted him down with it, knocking him sideways with terrible force. She tossed the gun aside and fixed her golden eyes on Retvenko. So he gets up and he's about to fight her and is throwing all kinds of shit at her. The woman growled as the gale seized her, hurtling her back through the open doorway. She seized the jam, trying to keep hold. Retvenko laughed. He'd forgotten how good it felt to fight. Then from behind him he heard a loud crack, the shriek of nails torn free and rending timber. He looked over his shoulder and saw the briefest glimpse of the dawn sky, the wharf. The wall was gone. Strong arms seized him, clasping his hands to his sides, preventing him from using his power. He was rising, sailing upward, the harbor shrinking beneath him. He saw the roof of the harbor master's office, the body of the first mate in a heap on the dock, the ship Retvenko had been meant to sail on, its deck a mess of broken boards, bodies piled near the shattered masts. His attackers had been there first. So the man who's holding him is Shu. His black hair pulled into a tight bun, his golden eyes narrowed against the rush of the wind, and from his back emerged two vast wings that beat against the sky, hinged, gracefully wrought in looping silver filigree and taut canvas. What in the hell is this? Like, I don't even know. And the fact that they're both Shu, I don't know if that's significant or if that just happens to be, if they're from that nation and there's something going on there, because that's where Bolio-Bayor was from. So is this some sort of like response to him being taken or what? The woman is like, I'm guessing like Nina, where she's a heartrender who's on Jurda Parem and is able to heal herself really quickly. I think, but again, I'm not sure. The building of wings for this guy to be able to fly, like how does that work? I don't even know. So there's lots going on here is what I'm saying. And, they clearly want him because they went and killed a bunch of people and left a trail behind them of places that he was going to be or should have been. So I don't know what to make of this, guys. I know I keep saying that, but I'm just so, this opens up a lot of different doors, so we'll see. So let's go to Wylan's POV. Poor Wylan still looks like Bolio-Bayor's son. And he is not used to it. He keeps looking in the windows, seeing his reflection, and being like, what the fuck? And then realizing that he does not look like himself anymore. And he is here at this casino, for lack of a better word, working for Kaz. He's part of an overall sort of grift here. So it turns out that what they're trying to do is get access to a man's, what's the word I want? His study and his files. And what they are trying to do is keep this guy busy so that Kaz can go and break into this guy's place, look through all his stuff, and have plenty of time before the man actually stops playing and begins to head home. And everybody is in position to make this happen. So Wylan is the waiter, and he is meant to sort of just keep an eye on everything and send messages back and forth or updates on, if anything were to go really wrong, which doesn't wind up happening. Kaz is there dealing the actual cards and not using his gloves, which Wylan is just sort of fascinated by because Kaz outside of his gloves to him looks wrong. He's just staring at Kaz's hands like, this is weird. I don't like this. Which I find sort of amusing and in a sad way that Kaz is, he draws so much attention when he doesn't have his gloves on. Not attention in general. If people don't know who he is, of course they won't. But the fact that he wears those gloves so consistently that everybody is a little weirded out by it when he doesn't have them on really goes to show what a part of him they've become. And Jesper, meanwhile, is losing really badly because obviously Kaz can sort of hold he can handle the deck that he's dealing in a subtle enough way. Nobody knows that he's dealing Jesper bad hands, but they need to keep this man winning in order to keep him at the tables. So yeah, the guy, his name is Specht. I think, let's see. Your grand scheme is to give Jesper a line of credit and make him play cards with Cornelis Smeet. Oh, right. Smeet likes the high-stakes three-man Bramble and Blondes, said Kaz. So we're going to give him both. I'll deal the first half of the night, then Specht will take over. Wylan didn't know Specht well. He was a former Navy seaman, a member of the dregs who had piloted their ship to and from the ice court. If Wylan was honest, between the grizzled jaw and the tattoos that ran halfway up Specht's neck, he found the sailor slightly frightening. But even Specht had looked concerned when he said, I can deal cards, Kaz, but I can't control a deck. You don't have to. From the time you sit down, it'll be an honest game. The important thing is to keep Smeet at the tables until midnight. The shift change is when we risk losing him. As soon as I stand up, he's going to start thinking about moving on to another game or calling it a night. So you need to do everything you can to keep his ass firmly planted at that table. I can handle it, Jesper said. Nina had just scowled. Sure, and maybe for phase 2 of this plan, I can masquerade as a Jorda Perem dealer. What could possibly go wrong? I really enjoy this. Nina's just like, Jesper's whole deal is that he fucked up because he is in debt due to gambling. And the main part of this is going to be that he's gambling. Cool. That's a good idea. Which, on the one hand, she has a point. But on the other hand, doesn't that mean that he's going to play his part all the more convincingly because he is a fucking, like, gambling addict? Which it turns out does sort of like wind up working in his favor in a weird way. I found it so frustrating that he gets put in this position, and not because he doesn't deserve it, because Jesper did fuck up and was very stupid about the way he handled everything. But the fact that he hasn't played like since that time when he fucked up, and the first time he gets to play again is a fixed game that he's destined to lose. And of course, it's not like this is their operation. This is not like the casino is in on it and everything that they're betting isn't real. Jesper's betting real money that Kaz just got from the end of the previous book from Pekka Rollins as a loan. So everything that he loses, he's really losing. This isn't a game this isn't a setup that it all just looks that way. He really loses it, and he really loses his guns as well, because eventually he runs out of fucking money. And that is just a very difficult thing that I have trouble with as somebody who is broke, that they're like sinking money into this 4 hours of playing so that they can pull this little side heist, this sort of side mission, really. It's just too much money, man. And he loses his guns, and like, I'm sure he'll get them back eventually, but they're locked up in the safe at the casino. Like, if they pull that off, it's going to be because they have finished every other thing. And now they're doing like the small cleanup stuff. So I don't anticipate him getting them back anytime soon, unless this dude who won them off him brings them home and they can like jump him on the way home and get them back. But I don't know. I don't see them taking that risk. We'll see. So yeah, then we have Wylan like thinking about everything that happened and the fact that his father is like responsible for this whole thing. And I like the fact that Wylan is just so unsure of everything. We have a whole thing later with Wylan remembering Kaz questioning this guy. And I love the setup here. So the first thing that you hear, and I say hear meaning like, I think about it as if it were a TV show. where there's a brief flashback and you see a piece of something and then you come back to the present and there isn't any context, but you feel like you know what was happening. And then later on, the show gives you a little more context and you're like, wow, I did not know what was happening. It sort of reminds me of Veronica Mars a little bit. Wylan is thinking to Kaz, questioning the man who knows the commands for this man, Cornelis's dogs. And Wylan is thinking about this with some regret in his like vibe, remembering how Kaz had this guy hung upside down by his feet from a building edge, demanding answers. And the man is telling him, I'm a good man, before Kaz apparently kills him. Like he says, we know that this guy wound up dead, and Wylan is kind of cut up about it and thinking about how the man kept thinking to himself, I'm a good man, or kept saying that out loud. And the first time you hear that, I'm a good man, but he wasn't going to be coming back, you're like, oh shit, that's fucked up. I know Kaz is brutal and he's angry and he's going to do whatever he needs to do, but still, that's fucked up. And then a little while on, he thinks to himself, he might still be alive if he had just stopped talking. And you're kind of like, what's that mean? And then he moves on and goes back into the scene again. And then finally at the end, you get the full picture, which is Kaz hung this guy upside down, intending to scare him into telling him what he needed to know, and then bring him back onto the roof and tell the guy to shut his mouth or else they'd kill him, and go on with their plan. Thing is, this guy didn't know Kaz fully intended to let him live, and began begging for his life using some like bargaining chips that he had up his sleeve. And one of those chips is that this man is blackmailing a sex worker who he knows has been stealing from her mistress. And that he basically gets to have sex with her whenever he wants for free, in exchange for not telling her mistress, because the last woman who was caught stealing from the mistress was beaten to death. So essentially, on pain of death, is raping this woman. And he tells Kaz this, mistakenly thinking that Kaz is going to have as little regard for the life of a sex worker as he apparently does. He is wrong. Kaz has 2 sex workers on his fucking crew right now. Inej she was forced into this like a slave. And Nina, it's like sort of unclear how much she actually did sex work and how much she just did like body work with her Grisha skill. But I imagine that men were paying to sleep with her as well, right? I don't think that was like excluded from her, but this dude really, he misunderstands Kaz in a profound way. So Kaz, like hearing that this guy is raping this woman or else going to turn her over to someone who will kill her, his protective side surfaces. And he begins to loosen his hold on the guy's ankle. The guy's like, she's just some prostitute. What's the big deal? And then begins chanting, I'm a good man. I'm a good man. And obviously, he's not a fucking good man. And Kaz says, there are no good men in the barrel. The climate does not agree with them, and drops the guy. So, Wylan, understandably, I mean, if I'm with somebody who just like lets somebody fall to their death, even if I feel like they were a terrible human being, I don't think I'm just like not going to have any feelings about that or be upset by it. And I'm sure it's awful to watch happen. Wylan isn't dealing with it super well. It's just plaguing him. They saw a lot of death when they were at the ice court, and they got in fights and killed people and shot people, and but I feel like there's a certain distance that you can have in the heat of the moment, or that Wylan had when he set up explosives, for example, that you can be like, well, this was war. This was battle. And you do what you need to do because they are also trying to kill you. But this situation, this guy was helpless, completely at Kaz's mercy, and just happened to know something Kaz needed to know, and would not have been in this situation at all if not for that, and wouldn't have been running his mouth about this woman if it weren't for the fact that he was, you know, like possibly about to die. So Wylan just has a bit of an issue with it. I don't even want to say that he thinks Kaz was in the wrong entirely. I think he does think Kaz shouldn't have done what he did, and that he let his feelings about Inej cloud how he was handling the situation. But I don't know, really. All I know is that Wylan doesn't feel like he belongs on this crew overall. He doesn't think that this place, that these people are like, that he fits with them, you know? And I get that to a point, that feeling of just, everybody else here is willing to do things that I'm not. And I don't know how to reconcile that. That I don't fit with my family. Like, he can't read. His father was ready to, like, let him die and not give a shit about him. Obviously, his old life has nothing for him. But this new life is such an other extreme that he doesn't fit here either. At least not yet. And he doesn't know what to do with that. So I feel for Wylan in a lot of ways, because he's so young and he's just doing the best he can to fucking stay alive. And he doesn't have a lot of options at his disposal right now. You know, it's just, and he cares about Inej, like, obviously is feeling sort of indirectly responsible because of it being his own father who has abducted her. So he's not going to turn his back on this crew, but he also feels like distant from it. So that sucks. So, all right, back to the plan. So they're talking about all of this. Like, we have a little flashback, and Nina is saying, like, of course, this man is going to talk. You need to talk him into spending the night with you. But he won't say yes. And Nina's like hell he won't. And I love Matthias getting all, like, irritated with her and saying, Nina, because he doesn't want her to spend the night with this strange man. But Nina just kind of wants to prove that she can do it. Which, can I just say how much I fucking, like, relate to that? That I will do stuff like that. Not anymore, but I did a lot more when I was younger. Not because I was, like, interested or even trying to make somebody that I was with, or maybe would be with soon, jealous, but simply for my own entertainment. Just like, can I do it? Are they going to be fooled by this whole act? I bet they will. And just fucking having fun with it, because there is a certain, like, power rush that you get when you are super gorgeous and can, like, wrap men around your finger, and women too sometimes, due to that. And you just, yeah. There's a certain amount of just simple pride there, where she's like, oh yeah, I can get him to spend the night with me. She doesn't want to fuck this guy. She doesn't, you know, but she wants to prove that he would do it. But Kaz is like, yeah, no, he doesn't cheat at cards and he doesn't cheat on his wife. So he definitely will not be coming with you. You just need to stroke his ego and make him feel like a big man with a beautiful woman sitting beside him as he, like, wins all evening long. You need to make this a really good night, basically, that he doesn't want to end. So yeah, I really, this, I'm going to read this. Nina was certainly doing her best, and Wylan didn't know whether to be impressed or concerned. She was dressed in a sheer lavender gown, rigged with some kind of corset that pushed her cleavage to alarming heights. And though she'd lost weight since her battle with the Parem, there was still plenty of her for Smeet to grab onto. She'd settled her rump firmly on his knee, arm around his shoulder, and was cooing prettily in his ear, her hands caressing his chest and occasionally slipping beneath his jacket like a beagle searching for treats. She stopped only to order oysters or another bottle of champagne. Wylan knew Nina could handle just about any man and any situation, but he didn't think she should have to sit half-dressed in a drafty gambling parlor perched on some leering lawyer's lap. At the very least, she was probably going to catch cold. Okay. I want to unpack all of this. I don't know if Wylan is gay or bi, but either way, the wholesomeness of this whole thing is so cute. Her cleavage pushed to alarming heights. She's lost a lot of weight, so she's looking pretty skinny, but she's still pretty. It's just, I'm concerned about that weight loss. That's no good. I know she's safe, but she shouldn't have to do this. She's like, she's dressed so that she's not protected. She should be resting. This is just really bad for her. There is no like judgment made. There's no anything except concern for her and worry about her health and overall how she shouldn't be asked to do something like this, which I just find so refreshing because it's the kind of thing that it would be really easy in this description of her to fall in, and I'm saying this with full understanding that Leigh Bardugo is a woman, like that this is something I want you all to like admit if you are questioning me on this right now mentally, that women fall into the male gaze in describing women in their literature an alarming amount. Right? Like women just sort of, because that's what we were like often raised on. We're raised on men's writing a lot of the time, unless an effort is put into giving us exposure to wider varieties of people. And so we will often fall back on what we know when we describe what women look like in our writing. And what we know is the way that men look at women. And I love that this paragraph gets across that she's dressed in something very revealing, that she's impressive and beautiful to look at, that what she's doing is clearly working, that she is capable of handling this guy, but it does so without really getting into any detail about her body except for her cleavage being at alarming heights. And in a way that's framed completely within concern for her overall well-being. It's just really nice because, like I said, whether it's a woman writing something or not, this can be handled very badly. So I was reading that just kind of like giggling to myself. So Jesper's losing and the night is beginning to wrap up for Kaz. And finally, Jesper decides that he is going to do what he needs to do in order to keep this fucking guy here. And by that, he means I am going to put up my guns. This poor dude Wylan is what I mean by poor dude, is so out of his element that even though he's supposed to be encouraging this man to stay all night, doing everything he can to make that happen, as soon as Jesper begins to put his guns up, Wylan can't help but yell, "No, don't." And Jesper is unimpressed. Like, obviously he has to play a role because he's not supposed to know this kid, and it's supposed to be just a waiter who's sticking his nose where it doesn't belong. But also, there is like, this is the entire plan that you're undermining in front of what are you doing? So he puts up his guns and loses them, as we find out later. And meanwhile, Nina has gotten this like whistle from around this dude's neck as she's been stroking and petting him, and put it on a tray with a bunch of leftover oyster shells. So when Wylan takes that tray away, Kaz gets his hand on that whistle and uses it when they go to the guy's home. And he uses the commands on the whistle to stop the dogs from attacking them as they get through. And Matthias meets them there and is like the muscle that's keeping a watch outside. Now, they have to look through so very many files in order to find, because what they're trying to do is get a sense of where Van Eck is keeping Nina, as well as some other things that he winds up looking into. I'm going to get there in a second. Let's see. The whole house smelled of dog, damp fur, oily hides, warm breath, moist with the stink of raw meat. And the whole way that this has worked out is just really pretty impressive that Kaz was able to put it together, how to get past these dogs, because they can't just drug their food because they're fed in the morning. So that wouldn't do them any good if they're breaking in at night and needing to find a way to keep this guy out of the house and, you know, the whole thing. Kaz had arranged for the private parlor in the Cumulus. Nina had caressed the whistle from beneath Smeat's shirt. Piece by piece, the plan had come together. Wylan did not want to think about what they'd done to obtain the whistle commands. He shivered when he remembered what Smeat had said. One of my clerks never came back from his holiday. He never would. So they get past these dogs and go up into the office. And begin going through everything. Smeat had served as John Van Eck's attorney and property manager for as long as Wylan could remember. First, we make sure your father has no new acquisitions under his name. Then we search under your stepmother's name and yours. Don't call her that. Alice is barely older than I am, and my father won't have kept property in my name. You'd be surprised what a man will do to avoid paying taxes. Kaz believed Wylan's father had to have private holdings, places he'd kept off the public registers, places he'd stashed something or someone he didn't want found. Kaz read names and ledger entries aloud, asking Wylan questions and trying to find connections to properties or companies they hadn't yet discovered. Wylan knew he owed his father nothing, but it still felt like a betrayal. So yeah, they're going through everything, and it turns out that there is something under his name. A printing press, as a joke because his son can't read. And Isle Comedie, I think is how you say it. An abandoned island with nothing on it but a broken down amusement park, a worthless place for his worthless, illiterate son. He shouldn't have asked. Which I assumed was where they were going to be keeping her, and I'm not remembering if that's even correct. What was your mother's family name? There's nothing in her name. Humor me. Hendricks. When did she die? When I was 8. My father got worse after she was gone. He wouldn't let me go to her funeral. I don't even know where she's buried. Why do you guys say that anyway? No mourners, no funerals. Why not just say good luck or be safe? We like to keep our expectations low. I really enjoyed that. His eyes moved back and forth between two ledgers, then he snapped the leather covers shut. Let's go. Did you find something? Kaz nodded once. I know where she is. Wylan didn't think he imagined the tension and the rasp of Kaz's voice. Kaz never yelled the way Wylan's father did, but Wylan had learned to listen for that low note, that bit of black harmony that crept into Kaz's tone when things were about to get dangerous. He'd heard it after the fight at the docks when Inej lay bleeding from Uman's knife, then when Kaz had learned it was Pekka Rollins who had tried to ambush them, again when they'd been double-crossed by Wylan's father. He'd heard it loud and clear atop the lighthouse as the clerk screamed for his life. Wylan watched as Kaz set the room to rights. And just as they're about to leave, they run into this guy's daughter, who is up and wandering around like fucking Cindy Lou Who stumbling on the Grinch. And Kaz basically tells her, I'm a monster that came out from under your bed, or maybe your closet, and unless you fucking go back to bed and don't say shit about this to anybody, I will come back out and kill your entire family. And your dog. Your very favorite dog. Good God, Kaz. And I mean, he's right about the fact that, like, he could have killed her and he showed some restraint there. I think he's telling the truth. But, like, yikes, you know? So then we go to Matthias's POV. And Matthias is watching as fucking Kaz plays this role. He runs into Cornelis, which this whole thing I thought for a second was accidental, but I find out later is completely planned. Because Kaz has to run into him in order to cover him placing the whistle back in Cornelis's pocket. And he runs into him and does such a good job at playing the role of, like, bumbling but respectful young kid who also points out the guy dropped his wallet, that this man literally picks his wallet up and pulls like $5 out and hands it to Kaz in thanks for how honest he is about telling him that he dropped his wallet instead of just letting him walk away and then taking it, which it's so beautiful and sad. Like, this poor guy is getting played so completely. And he doesn't know, you know. I don't even think he's done anything wrong. He seems like a perfectly fine person. But Jesus Christ, you know, like, it's just hard to watch. Thank you very much. There you are, young man. Pays to be honest. Yeah. You didn't put it on the chain? Asked Matthias as Kaz and Wylan joined him. Didn't bother. And I'm curious about that, like, why he didn't bother putting the whistle back on the chain. But he doesn't. And I don't know what that's about, if he's just figuring, like, this guy's been drinking, he won't know the difference or what. So then they head out, and they get into this little boat and head to the island that is where everybody buried their dead until such time as a plague happened, and then everybody had to cremate bodies rather than bury them because it was too dangerous to handle the bodies. Matthias is thinking over all kinds of things. He's thinking over about the fact that this, like, whole city is such a friggin' labyrinth that even though he's always been someone who prided himself on map making and sense of direction, that he's not able to do that in Ketterdam. Like, he just can't get things straight where they are, what roads lead where and what directions. Like, it's just, it's so disorderly. Black Vale was an eerie place, a miniature city of white marble mausoleums, many carved into the shape of ships, their stone figureheads weeping as they cut across an invisible sea. Some bore the stamp of Gezin's coins of favor, others the 3 flying fishes of Kirch that Nina said indicated a member of the family had served in the government. A few were watched over by Ravkin's saints in flowing marble robes. There was no sign of Gel or his ash tree. Fjerdans would not want to be interred above the earth where they could not take root, which I like. I thought that was kind of cool. Of course, like, Matthias, despite the fact that these are not Fjerdan burial sites, to him that's still, like, a sacred place. And the fact that Kaz would use this as a meeting place and, like, headquarters is really horrifying to him. And Kaz could just fucking give a shit at this point. So I just wanted to mention, like, if anybody has ever lived in Philadelphia, all I could think about was on the Schuylkill River, there is an area that's like this huge bank that looks down on the river. And now there's a road that goes between the river and this hillside. But it used to be just right on there. And there are lots of mausoleums like this built. And it is such a spooky but beautiful place because these mausoleums are white. The hillside is like really dark with fallen leaves. They stand out really brightly. And the water is just black. So it's this, like, this whole description of this reminded me so much of that because of it being right on the water and these mausoleums and whatnot. And so that's what I picture this when I'm reading this. So this is when they have their, like, meetup about what's going on and what they're going to do next. Jesper's really irritated that he had to use his guns to continue the night going. Kuwei is, for some reason, getting, like, pretty sullen about the fact that he's with these people and he really wants to get out of this. And I really just wanted to yell at him a little bit. Like, don't you know you would still be in Fjerda if it wasn't for these guys? And sure, you're not exactly free now, but, you know, what the fuck, dude? And he has to be, like, threatened into helping them. And I don't like that. I don't like it when I feel like somebody is in a crucial position to help this crew, but if they are given any escape, they'll take it, because that just makes them very unreliable. So I don't know. I'm very concerned about this. Meanwhile, Matthias is a little distracted because Nina is not looking super great. Like, she's obviously been sick. He feels like she looks worse than she did the day before, so things have been hard on her, and he just can't stop thinking about how worried about her he is, which is adorable. And it turns out the embassies are filled with diplomats from all over the place, and that word about Parem has probably gotten out. And Kaz says there were plenty of interested parties at the ice court to pick up gossip about Kuwei's liberation. The Fjerdans are here too. They've got a whole contingent of Druskel with them. That's good for us. The Shu and the Fjerdans don't know where to start looking for Kuwei, and all those Diplos making trouble at the Stadthal are going to create some nice noise to distract Van Eck. Did you find out where Van Eck is keeping her? I have a pretty good idea. We strike tomorrow at midnight. Let's see. Oh yeah, what's your progress on the Weevil? Wylan removed a small vial from his coat and set it down on the table. Matthias bent to peer at it. It's a chemical weevil. It doesn't really have a name yet. This little vial is going to eat Van Eck's bank accounts and his reputation. Wylan cleared his throat. Possibly. The chemistry is complicated. I was hoping Kuwei would help. I have other interests, Kuwei replied. Kaz's black gaze pinned Kuwei like the tip of a dagger. I suggest rethinking your priorities. Jesper gave Kuwei another nudge. That's Kaz's way of saying, help Wylan or I'll seal you up in one of these tombs and see how that suits your interests. Matthias was no longer sure what the shoe boy understood or didn't, but apparently he'd received the message. Kuwei swallowed and nodded grudgingly. Don't care about that. Don't care for it. So, then there's like mention of getting money back. And Nina tries to sort of play the moral high ground here and be like, this is about getting our friend back, not about the money. To which Kaz is like, none of us are going to be able to do jack shit after this if we don't have money. Everybody's going to be after us. We're all like wanting to start new lives. We earned that money. We're going to get it. But she doesn't really buy it. She sort of feels like if we get Inej out, we should just fucking count ourselves lucky and leave it at that. But Kaz is determined to basically like burn Van Eck's entire dynasty to the ground, which, you know, honestly, I can get behind. So let's see. Wylan pulled his sleeve down self-consciously. Inej is part of the crew. Just don't push it. Why not? Because the practical thing would be for Kaz to auction Kuwei to the highest bidder and forget about Inej entirely. He wouldn't. Wylan broke off abruptly, doubt creeping over his features. None of them really knew what Kaz would or wouldn't do. Sometimes Matthias wondered if Kaz was even sure. So, let's see. Where does this end? Oh, right. They're talking about the fact that Matthias is dead. And Matthias is like, what are you talking about? And it turns out that the guy who stood in for him so that he could escape from the prison last book was murdered, more than likely, by Fjerdan soldiers. And Matthias is really horrified in himself because when his name is brought up, which is like Musan, I think, or Musar, he does not recognize the name and has to be like, who's that? And they're like, the guy who took your spot. So he was murdered because everyone thought he was Matthias. And Matthias didn't even recognize the name. And he's just like judging himself really hard on that. Also, there's the potential for Boyoeor's son to invent an antidote for Perem, which makes Nina want to preserve him in particular. And it turns out that there are no, like, Kaz sent Pekka Rollins out to get in touch with Ravkin, what do you call them? Just like their contacts in Ravka, but it turns out they don't have contacts in Ravka. So he just basically did something that was going to keep Pekka Rollins busy, but unable to succeed, and is hoping that it'll distract him for quite a while before he realizes that he's been duped. Let's see. Has anyone noticed this whole city is looking for us, mad at us, or wants to kill us? So, said Kaz. Well, usually it's just half the city. Yeah, there's a lot. Like, there are a lot of irons in the fire. There are a lot of people at play. There are a lot of countries getting involved that we didn't see in the previous book. Muzzin, that is the name of the man who died. The knife that had killed Muzzin had been meant for Matthias, and the Fjerdans might well be responsible. The Druskel, his brothers, they'd wanted him to die without honor, murdered in an infirmary bed. It was a death fit for a traitor. It was the death he had earned. Now Matthias owed Muzzin a blood debt, but how would he ever pay it? What will they do with his body? He asked. It's probably already ashes on the Reaper's barge, said Kaz. There's something else, said Roddy. Someone's kicking up dust looking for Jesper. His creditors will have to wait, said Kaz, and Jesper winced. No, Roddy said with a shake of his head. A man showed up at the university. Jesper. He claims he's your father. End of the 3rd chapter. So that's a lot. I am very curious what's going on with his dad and if that's going to get more involved. And, you know, Jesper has the makings of a fabricator. Is his father a fabricator? Like, what's going on here? So, yeah, I'm super interested. Oh, boy, oh, boy. So thank you, Jill, again, very much for commissioning this episode. Everybody, please stay tuned because there will be an episode of The High Lord coming on in a couple of hours at about 3 o'clock. And, yeah, I am just really enjoying everything I'm covering right now. Having a good day today with all this media I'm getting into. So thank you all again, and hope you're enjoying this. And until next time, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.